The Bird in the Cage. School was out, and the summer I craved for so much came, but from its very start was shaping up to be a dull one. I was 10 years old, and all but one of my friends had departed for the seaside and mountains, leaving relatives behind to languish away the sunny days in our quiet neighborhood. My grandmother lived away, and I'd planned to spend the break with her, but a sudden case of appendicitis changed my plans. Who develops appendicitis at 65 anyway? I thought, and it baffles me even now to recall it. Luckily, my neighbor and erstwhile friend George would be around, so we decided to make the best of the months ahead. We delved into the warm summer months, playing cards, riding our bikes, and wandering in the grove at the edge of the neighborhood in search of a little plant we called dyes, which discolors the fingers when handled. All in all, we managed to have a good time, just the two of us. No sooner had we gotten into a playful rhythm when, early one July morning, I heard its song, of what came to be known as the bird in the cage. Its lonesome, shrill cry sounded like it came out of a hollow den, a piercing sound, unlike any bird song I'd ever heard. I started awake at the sound, wondering if I was dreaming, when all of a sudden, there it was again, for several moments repeating in a lonesome refrain. I realized the shrill sound came from the direction of the home of the Johnsons, an elderly couple who lived across the street. I thought it strange that they should be keeping a bird as a pet. It must be their sons, I thought. I'd always assumed them childless. Then out of the blue one day, their son came home from a long stint of wandering the world. Who was this guy? I remember asking my dad. But he simply said he'd been on a journey and had no time for kids my age and warned me to leave him alone. This only sparked my interest in the newcomer, and I imagined him a sailor who'd snared an exotic bird and brought it home from some distant tropical paradise. George had also heard its early morning cry. Excited, we spent the rest of the day talking only of the caged bird. What longing, what heartbreak we had heard in its voice. We talked about it for hours and finally concluded it must be some tropical bird far away from its home. We imagined its appearance, large stature, dressed in a medley coat of feathers and with an imposing crest donning its head. So obsessed were we for the rest of the summer by thoughts of that lonely caged bird that we decided to set it free and send it home. But how are we to do this? The Johnsons daily went out for long walks, the 40-something-year-old son strolling ahead of his parents as they were engaged in conversation. We figured they'd be gone just long enough to allow us to rescue the bird, and that's just what we decided to do. We waited for their next departure, and as soon as they were off, George climbed over the backyard fence with the skill of a seasoned burglar. Several moments passed before George reappeared at the fence.
"Nothing here,"
he said. "Nothing? Are you sure?" I marveled.
"Yeah, no bird. The cage must be inside the house," he said flatly.
We went back to my house and hid behind the old cypress that stood in the front yard, watching anxiously as the Johnsons now returned home. And it wasn't long before sounds of the birdsong came again from their backyard. That shrill cry became an undersong to our lives, a waking call at 7 o'clock sharp. It was early afternoon, and George and I were playing on the street when we heard it again.
"Now the Johnsons are probably taking a nap," George said. "The bird must be outside in its cage now," he mused. "You want to try to take a peek?"
I wasn't sure about it. The memory of having been grounded last winter for throwing a snowball through one of the Johnsons' windows was too fresh, and I didn't want to relive that experience. We decided that George would climb the fence and I would stand watch and signal with a whistle if someone should come to the door. Off he went again with the skill of a seasoned burglar over the fence. The bird cried, perhaps startled by George's approach. He must be opening the cage door, I imagined. Then George climbed back over the fence. What happened? I asked. But George said nothing. Did you set it free?
Can't set it free,
he said distractedly. What? What do you mean?
Go and see for yourself.
Bewildered, I climbed over the fence and into the Johnsons' yard, a bit clumsier than George, and tiptoed across the backyard into a meadow I'd never seen before, where the grass was well kept and wildflowers and roses were in bloom. Water cascaded from the mouth of a small fountain situated in a nook of the meadow as a breeze, cooled by the flowing waters, carried the scent of flowers through the air. The Johnson son was seated on a bench beneath an old rye pear tree, whose crooked branches were like a green crown on the top of his head. He lifted his gaze and looked directly at me. Now he cupped his hands around his mouth and produced the shrill noise that had been waking me all these summer mornings. I thought that he was mocking me, as he had done all that time since he had arrived home. I looked at him more carefully. He fixed his gaze on me. His eyes were like two black wells sucking me in. I started falling in them, further and further down, surrounded by bluish fog. It was like a dream in which you drop in the dark and wake up when you hit the bottom, but a dream that had no end. You keep falling for a lifetime. My dream. It was his dream. At last, I blinked and broke the spell. The son chuckled and mumbled something under his breath before starting to laugh in a way that reminded me of a child's laughter. If before I had thought that he was playing a joke, pretending to be a lonely bird locked in a cage, now I knew that he was the one locked, prisoner of the labyrinth of his mind. At home, I found George waiting for me.
So, what do you think?
He asked. He's just back from a long journey, and he's brought a bird along with him, I responded deliberately. George thought a minute, and oh so softly said,
I've got a feeling that he's still on that journey.
That day, we didn't play a lot. We were sitting in my yard telling each other stories quietly. From time to time, the shrill cry came from across the street. The bird in the cage was singing.